So, Rob, thank you very much for joining this interesting and insightful webinar on AI for good and bad, COVID-19, and digital Rubicon.
Great to be here, Ash, and thanks to you and Uptake.
Great, and just for the benefit of all of us, let me take an opportunity to introduce you to our participants today. So Rob is an adjunct professor of innovation at Kellogg School of Management of Northwestern University and Booth School of Business at Chicago University. Rob won Professor of the Year award from Kellogg's EMBA program for 4 consecutive years. And when he is not teaching, he is a partner at innovation and growth strategy firm Clario, and he is also a co-founder and chairman of Twin Global, the World Innovation Network. So Rob, before I go any further, could you please explain what Twin does and why did it start?
Great, thanks, Ash. And again, I'm excited to be here. This is a really important, exciting topic, and it's a really exciting time to be engaged in the manufacturing and resources industries. So what is the World Innovation Network, or Twin? Twin is a community, and we call ourselves a connective. It's a community with a little more than 2,000 participants around the world. We come from business, government, nonprofit, the arts, academia, defense. Our core is business, but we work really hard to make sure we have great people from all of these sectors. And we come from over 30 countries, meaning people living and working around the world in over 30 countries. We come together online, we come together when it's safe and smart in person, to share ideas and to share concepts. That's great, but really the #1 objective is to build trusted relationships, to come together from across industry, sector, geographic lines to share perspectives, because as we say, never leave serendipity to chance. So this Twin Connective is a serendipity engine, and you find opportunities, you uncover threats before others do, and you just build more effective, more satisfying, better lives together. So that's Twin Global.
Great, thank you very much, Rob. That's a great perspective on what Twin does, and I want to share with you that why I got picked and invited you to do this webinar with me is I read your article that you wrote for Forbes, I think in March,
right?
When the entire humanity, all of us across on this planet, were trying to grasp what has happened to us, what is going to happen, and you wrote very timely, and I would say that to some extent it was well ahead of time, this article where you said that this situation, the COVID-19 situation, has forced all the industries to cross what you define as a digital Rubicon. So Rubicon, it was the river that Julius Caesar crossed to Rome, and at the end of that river was perform or perish. So you make this case that the industries have been forced to cross this digital Rubicon, and now it's a do or die situation for them, where they do extremely well or they don't really do well. And they probably have a short runway, like 5-10 years. So would you please explain what do you mean by the digital Rubicon, and why do you think there is a short runway to actually do something here?
Great. So thanks, Ash. You're talking about the article from March. With COVID-19, we've all crossed the digital Rubicon.
That's right.
For those of you who might not remember your Roman history, Julius Caesar in, I believe, 53 BC, led the 13th Legion across the Rubicon River toward Rome. And on that day, everyone who was with Caesar knew that they were either going to complete victory or utter defeat, meaning death. The reason was that it had been a long time a stricture in the Roman Republic that no one was allowed to bring an army to Rome without the express invitation of the Senate. So they had, by crossing the river, declared war on the Roman Republic. And so we have, with COVID, done something similar, not by our choice. We've all been foisted across this digital river. What do I mean by this? Well, digital transformation has been around for a number of years, especially the past few years. Everybody's been talking about it, trying to figure out what to do about it. And there have been pockets of rapid progress, but many people have just sort of dragged their feet around this. Well, with COVID, you don't have a choice. Everybody has been foisted into this space, and there are many examples. I'll just give you one. We all know about work from home and how that's opening a lot of people's minds and eyes to the possibilities. It can be frustrating too, but it has rapidly changed mindsets and perspective on what's possible. We'll give you a specific example, and this is actually relevant for manufacturers. There's a great company here in the Chicago area. I can't say which company it is, but this is already public that they're doing this. But they're trying to tie down everything with regulators and customers to make sure it's all set before they go public about the topic. But this company has a large division where for 100 years, all of their business, and these were audits for certifications, were done in person. So their team would get on a plane, go to a factory and show up unannounced to do an audit, or go to an office and show up unannounced to do a safety security certification. And along came COVID. So the CEO was telling me, you know, we were so excited that within 2 weeks, we were able to port almost all, not all, but almost all of these audit activities from in-person to online. Within 2 weeks, at scale, the entire business unit. Now, she said we learned a few things. First of all, we learned how much we could do fast when it was necessary. And this was like an experiment at scale in a corporation. You don't see that very often. And second, we learned that our customers and our employees like it more. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, the customers, that was still an unannounced audit. I mean, that's very important. But people aren't showing up at their manufacturing facility or their office. They're popping up online. The company is able to do more of these audits more efficiently. So that's better. And the employees liked it more. Why is that? Well, because before they'd get on a plane and stay at the Hilton Garden Inn Tucson Airport for 2 nights. Today, they get their audits done and they're home for dinner. So this was dramatically different. And here is the key point that the CEO shared with me. She said, you know, companies have been talking about what they can bring online for years, and you know how this would have gone before COVID. We would have talked about the possibility of porting some of these online. We would have put a team together of smart people, and we said, go figure it out, see what's possible. They would have had a smart process. They would have done some pilots, a couple of little pilots with customers, and then a year later, we'd have all the reasons why this won't work. And what happened here? In 2 weeks, we made it happen and it worked great. So this is what I mean by the digital Rubicon. The second question you asked, Ash, was why do I believe there's maybe a 5-year window to either succeed or fail? And by the way, if it turns out to be 7 years, don't call me. I'm not making date predictions. But I really do believe it is the next 5 years. We have incumbent companies across industries have about 5 years to figure out what this means for them and for their customers for the following reason: the 5G rollout. The 5G rollout will happen over the next 5, 6, 7 years. It'll happen at different paces around the world, of course. But why 5G is essential here is it destroys latency. It allows us access to more and more places, more and more conditions, more and more data faster, and enables things we could never have done before. So you can be sure, everybody on this webinar today can be sure there will be thousands of people experimenting with different business models, different approaches to solving the needs of your customers and your customers' customers, using the capabilities unlocked by digital technologies and in particular by the 5G rollout. That's why I believe that most companies really do only have about 5 years to either figure it out and succeed or fade.
How would you advise industrial companies so they maximize their chances of success at the end of 5 years, what can they do to ensure that they don't perish and they win overall?
Well, so that's a key question. Now, understand that what I'm not saying is that most of the incumbents will be out of business in 5 years. I'm not saying that. When you're large, especially when you're large, you've got a really long runway. Even when change is happening rather quickly, notwithstanding the current crisis where some industries are down 75% or more in a matter of a couple of months. But in general, when you're really large, you tend to have a long runway before the change becomes imminently destructive or existentially threatening. And the problem is that runway can either be a runway to take off or a runway off eventually the cliff. And so this is really what we're talking about. To use the retail example you shared, and it's very different than manufacturing, of course, but it does illustrate one really important point. Stores that are doing impressively well right now, like Walmart, Target, they have been building their digital infrastructure for years before this. In Walmart's case, they started in the early 2000s. And I have specific examples about this if you're interested. Target, the past few years, has been investing heavily in digital. So they were ready.
Winners prepared before crisis.
They were prepared before the crisis. But it's not that they said, oh, I bet there's going to be a crisis, we better get ready. They already knew there was a long, slow crisis at hand, which was just the digitalization of commerce. And so they were ready. Now, the illustrative point for manufacturers, and Clario works with industrial resources, manufacturing, electric utilities, energy, all the food and agriculture, the big, we call them prosperity sectors. So in the manufacturing space, the relevance here is, you mentioned Kohl's, and I mean, this was a great company for years. But one of the things they did, which is dangerous, is they tried to be a little bit of both, and they did nothing all in, other than their traditional core, which they know how to do. So they kept doing more of that. They would do a little bit of digital here and a little bit of digital there, and they'd try a coupon online, but they weren't going all in the way the Target and Walmart and some others have been going. And so when the time came, they really were stuck in the middle. You mentioned TJ Maxx, brilliant company, under horrible duress right now. But I bet a year from now or so, my guess is a year from now, those who are holding TJX shares will be pretty happy, because I think they're better prepared than most retailers. So what does it mean for manufacturing? This isn't a case where incremental change is going to get you to the future, because it won't. Incremental change will keep you moving along a path, that runway I talked about. But if the demands of customers are radically changing, if what your competitors, whether they're established competitors or new competitors, can do is substantially step change better and dramatically better than what you're currently doing, then those incremental changes will not get you to here where you need to be. And that's I think the insight for manufacturing organizations. By the way, keep your core businesses healthy, keep them operating the best ways you can, but make sure you make significant commitments to what is likely to happen next.
Okay, that's a very good explanation, Rob. Now, let me take this a step further. Is when we think about digital, when we think about innovating the business models, thinking about digital and everything, there are blockers and then there are enablers. And every organization has different sets of blockers and enablers. How do you think those blockers and enablers changing post-COVID? Is there any change, or things are going to be the same? What I'm trying to ask is the challenges that those manufacturers were facing pre-COVID in implementing digital technology or digital strategy. Are those challenges going to stay the same, or there is going to be some improvement, or they're going to just get worsen up?
Yeah. Well, so I'd answer that in two ways. First of all, let's look for a few things that will remain the same. that we want to focus on because they make us better. And the most important one is a fundamental objective of business is to serve customers, and also to understand what your customers' needs are as well, especially in a manufacturing supply chain. If you only look at your customers and the needs and objectives of your customers change, then you're in some trouble. So it's not their job, it's not the customer's job to tell us what they might need in the future. It's our job to figure it out and offer it to them. Now, one thing that is different, very different, and I think that this has cleaned the slate across the board, is even 6 months ago, I'm sure you might recall with companies you talk to at Uptake, and certainly some of the companies I interact with in teaching or at Clario, there were plenty of people who felt they had really good reasons why. Well, you know, we get that this digital thing is coming, it's important, but it's not our core. Or, you know, let's do that next year. We don't have any, people say bandwidth. You know, I don't know where that notion came from. We don't really have the time for that, because what they're saying is it's not a priority. Well, now it's a priority. And in an odd sense, while the crisis has challenged all of us, it has also freed leadership from having to make the case as to why digital is essential. Because anybody paying attention knows now that it's essential and that we have to get on board with it. So I don't think that's going back. The reason these two things relate is, it's one thing to say, I know we need to get more digital. I know we need to incorporate artificial intelligence and remote working and all these things into our environment. But the next obvious question is, how do we do that? For what ends? For what objectives? What business models will support them? There are a whole range of questions. But at least we don't have to argue that the world is going digital, because it already has.
Interesting. You mentioned two interesting topics all the time. One is having a peripheral vision, is while, and this is aligned with the point that you made, that the manufacturers are too busy doing their core activities that they don't really consider the digital or transformative innovation a priority, and they always complain about limitations on bandwidth, whatever that thing is. And you always stress upon that while you work on the core, always try to have that peripheral vision, because that's where attack is going to happen. That's where the business models get disrupted. That's where the new competitors come. Now, I think everybody on the planet heard you, and all 8 billion of us are now on the periphery today. We lost our core, right? So most of the industries are, trying to, they are on periphery today. Their center is dislocated, and all of us trying to find the new normal, the new core where we will operate. In a couple of months, hopefully, we will get back to a core, a new core. What do you think would help industries to find the new periphery after we have reached the new core?
First of all, you're absolutely right. The big threats and opportunities do not come from your core competitors. Now, occasionally somebody makes an acquisition you're surprised by, or somebody launches something from a dark room, but it really doesn't happen that often. You already know everything your direct competitors are doing, and they already know everything you're doing. So the big threats and opportunities come from the peripheries. Now, that could be small startups and inventors, technologists, it could be, but it could also be a large established enterprise from another industry moving into yours. Or it could be one of the tech giants coming to destroy you. The periphery refers to the things outside your core. We make the assumption that the core is taking care of itself, and it will, and you need great people doing that. Otherwise, you don't have a business. But meanwhile, you have to have a few great people focused on what might be coming next. And the periphery is everything outside, but again, we can't know everything. So you have to be strategic about where you pay attention. What peripheries are you looking at? So this could be new technologies. It could be new kinds of players in your ecosystem, or that seem to be incurring into your ecosystem in small ways. It could be geographically. There are lots of things we can learn in this part of the world from other parts of the world. So wherever those are, every company must have a peripheral vision, and there must be a strategy behind why we're tracking the things we're tracking, and that changes over time. Second, we need a way, an ongoing way to generate foresight. What I mean by foresight is insight into plausible futures, where the future might be going. And this comes from collecting and analyzing data from the peripheries, translating them into your environment, and figuring out how to place your bets. And having then a portfolio that keeps us relevant regardless of which direction the world turns. Ash, the essence of innovation strategy is building a portfolio of options on the future.
As you talk about periphery, you also talk about proximity, that all businesses, they should be as close to their consumers. It could be a service company delivering service. It could be a manufacturing firm producing goods. They should be as close to the user of their product or their services so that they can see, analyze, respond,
right,
deliver, and service those needs at the closest point possible. So there is no delay, there is no lag.
Right.
Can you help explain this concept in the context of core industries like mining, like oil and gas, manufacturing, energy?
Absolutely. So, Ash, let me briefly explain what I mean by proximity. Digital technologies, everybody's paying attention to all these different kinds of digital technologies, but very few people have noticed one common underlying dynamic that they all drive in the economy across all industries. And that is digital technologies in many different ways allow us to distribute access to data, analytics, sensing, agency, the ability to make decisions, and production, think 3D printing or rooftop solar energy generation. So digital technologies allow this atomization of access to each moment in time and space and a coordination thereof. And thus, and here's the key point, digital technologies are progressively pushing the production and provision of value, the creation of it at the moment of demand. And this is being driven by, on the one side, the demand, which is customers, human beings. And what we always know about human beings is they want what they want, when they want, where they want. And by the way, if somebody can give it to them for free, they're going to win, but that's another issue. On the other hand, the supply side. The supply side has been the constraint for all of human history, in the sense that we've wanted to make and provide exactly what people want, when they want it, whenever, but we haven't been able to. So if you think about, not to get too esoteric, but if you think about the system where today we have scale manufacturing with bulk product going out to large factories, and in the future, in more and more places, we'll be dealing with mid-size or smaller operations, this changes what we have to provide to the market and how we have to provide it. It's almost like the difference between, in the old communications networks, the old telephone network, which was circuit switching, where I'm on the phone with you and I own a circuit so nobody else can use it, to what we have with the internet, of course, which is packet switching, where we have small pieces flying around a complex network coming together in the right moment to serve the need. In a very odd way, that's in the long run where manufacturing capabilities and resource capabilities will eventually be going. And that won't be possible without.
That's a great summary. I'll just take one step further. Whatever the new normal is going to be, the importance of the assets or equipment for these asset-intensive industries is going to only increase and not decrease. Is there a place for a system of intelligence which can sit on top of these system of records that can help the operator of these core industries manage and run their assets more effectively? And that system of intelligence is supported by industrial AI. Do you think that there is more compelling business case today as it was like a couple of months ago?
Well, I don't know, as opposed to a couple of months ago in terms of the intellectual business case, but in terms of what I think is different from a few months ago, which is actually even more important, is the ability to make the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The ability to make smarter, bigger, faster, better, transformative cases with leadership is not easy, but it's easier today than it was 3 months ago. Further, people feel that big change is coming, and so the ground is more fertile to plant such seeds. It's easier to make the case in the sense that people's minds are more open now. Leadership, the people who need to make decisions and allocate capital, even though there are extraordinary capital constraints in many places, they recognize that big change is coming. So they're more open to that conversation now than I've ever seen in my career. You see the
And
distinction?
yeah, no, I absolutely, that makes total sense. So just taking you back to the core industries and industrial AI,
Yeah.
for the last decade, those core companies, like you named some biggies in mining industry, most of them, they focused on doing it themselves, the entire technology stack, solving it all by themselves. And this was one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum was, I don't know what to do. I'm totally going to rely on someone or some people. So what do you think this is going to change this dynamics? Because now, if you think about essential versus non-essential workers who are not supposed to, not required to actually attend offices, it could be a digital team, it could be data science team. Is the post-COVID world going to be different for the DIY customers, DIY operators versus the totally reliant? Or is the mix is going to change? More people will think about doing it themselves now, or more people will think about buying it or partnering from outside?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think the mix is going to change quite a bit. What I recommend to companies on that question of should you partner or it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But given the pace of change that's going on, no company should expect itself to know everything about all of these developments. You need a variety of partners to be able to do that. Fortunately, with software as a service and some of these other infrastructures, it's not that expensive to have great peripheral vision, insights, and partners you can work with in various things. But what I mean is the mix will change. It won't be that everybody will run to doing everything with partner or everybody will stop doing DIY. I think we need to make sure, one, that our companies have the expertise inside to understand what's going on. Not to build everything, not to do everything. That's unlikely to happen very effectively over time for lots of reasons we can talk about. But enough of the right people internally to understand how this stuff works, to understand where things are going, to interface with companies like Uptake. On the other hand of on the other side of the spectrum, in terms of DIY, there are very interesting opportunities popping up where you can find technology platforms where you can do more and more on your, honestly on your own and experiment. Now that doesn't mean you're going to do something on your own and plug it into your manufacturing facility and hope that it works. What it means is you can experiment more rapidly with applications like artificial intelligence. You can experiment with enterprise application development more rapidly with things like the no-code movement, for instance, that's rising. A good friend of mine, Gary Helberman, started Uncork, and it's been mind-blowing what they've been able to accomplish without traditional coding. And so you're seeing these tools that allow companies to move fast and experiment. And you're seeing a proliferation of partners who can bring leading edge technology to a company.
You made a couple of good points, Rob, and I would just take one point from that is from Uptake's perspective, I think what we look for is just that openness of mind, and everything else is easy. So if this COVID situation is doing anything, is actually helping people to understand and realize, the true value of industrial AI, and we have seen very good improvement in terms of our ability to deliver value to customer, our ability to work with customers and accelerate their visions across multiple different industries. So that, I think these are pretty exciting times, and I hope that at the end of all this, when we find our new core, we all are much happier than we were pre-COVID. So,
Well, Ash, I appreciate that. Although happiness comes more from inside than it does from exogenous factors. That's another conversation for another webinar. But I'd like to offer one more thought before we conclude, if I may. I fully understand how dramatically challenging this period is, and not only from the perspective of the dozens of people I've been talking to over the past few months, very often talking to. I'm writing about some of this in Forbes every couple of weeks, but also from my own personal experience. In my 20s, one of my mentors told me, I was trying to decide whether to start a business or not. That the business became Clario. And he said something that's always stuck with me: Rob, you never know what it's like to be an entrepreneur until you've made payroll from your own pocket. And we feel that. Entrepreneurs feel that right now. I'm an angel investor in over 20 companies, and I'm talking to them. Some of them are doing far better right now because of the crisis. Some of them are on the edge of disaster, and it's a really hard time. But I want to underscore that through this challenge, the step changes we're seeing are probably the greatest opportunity any of us has for the next generation, for this next 20 years, to make significant, meaningful change happen. This is the time to act.
great closure, Rob. Thank you very much. I'm going to look at the questions if there are any. Sorry, just one question. Proximity was a key point made for the future, yet AI is without boundaries. How can we marry these two?
Oh, interesting. Well, AI being without boundaries is actually reflective of one of the dynamics that is pulling us toward the world of proximity. Because artificial intelligence systems can distribute not only sensing and analytics, but even agency, the ability to make decisions at smaller and smaller moments around the economy, ever closer to each individual consumer, customer, et cetera. So it's actually, to your point, Kirk, or your question, Kirk, it is actually AI that is one of the essential factors to allow us to have the coordinative capability to, for any company or organization to operate at scale in such an environment. I mean, think about it this way. If everybody made their own products in their backyard or at their farm, and you were reliant only on the people who lived in your little village, which is what things were like a few hundred years ago, for the most part, then we wouldn't need any of this technology, wouldn't need the AI, but also our standard of living and what's possible would be far lower. So it's artificial intelligence that is going to allow us to bring these capabilities to every household, every business in the world, and coordinate it at scale effectively.
Thank you, Kirk.
Thanks, Kirk. Great. So Ash, anything else at this point?
I think that's it, Rob. Once again, thank you very much for talking to all of us, and wish you a great weekend then.
You as well, and good luck to everybody at Uptake.
Thank you.